we're Chron. We were formed in 1979. Basically, we were part of what they called the second wave punk movement. The Apocalypse Now tour was what launched that. The Exploited, Discharge, Anti-Nowhere, Leg, Anti-Pasty, and we did a few tours around the UK, America. We didn't go to America with those, but basically we were in the same sort of era as the likes of those, and they still seem to be going on. Yeah, kicking.
Okay. So, presuming the people who get to watch this know absolutely fuck all about punk or what's going on in this weekend, how would you explain it to them?
I don't know anything about it either.
We were just asking someone who managed to find us and get in contact with us and say,
rock with an attitude.
yeah, well, there's this 20-year reunion of punk, would you like to play? And it would sound like a great idea to get back together and just have some fun.
That's the truth of it.
Yeah.
Really, we don't play as a band anymore. We did a reunion a few years ago and said we were asked to do this one. So yeah, we quite fancied doing it. Seemed to be well organised, big venue, a decent spread of bands, and.
But yeah, the bands. I mean, seeing some of the people we haven't seen for years and years, really. It's just been good to come up here and sort of reminisce. And
that's probably not the answer you wanted, really, is it?
No.
But yeah, the principle of it, I understand, is that it's a celebration of the old days. It was probably, without exception, all of the bands who were probably a bit after the actual 20-year date,
yeah.
1976. There's not many that have been on the bill here that were actually around then. But nonetheless, the principle's there. I think the opportunity was taken while the Sex Pistols had their reunion this year to back that up with something not quite, but coming up for as big. It's miles away, really.
Big-ish.
yeah.
Okay, so what do you make of the atmosphere here in general, both backstage, outside, and on stage?
It's great. Yeah. It's compared to how it was many years ago. Some of the gigs you go to, especially if you're like on a package, like the 4-band type package tour, there seems to be sort of rivalry between groups of fans, and quite a lot of venues just like there'd be an atmosphere, but here it's just everyone just seems to be getting into it and just having a good time and sort of meeting people probably they haven't seen for years and years, and it's excellent, brilliant.
Yeah, it's
bloody hard work.
Security chaps have backed that up. They've
yeah.
We've been out with it for quite a long time, and to be quite frank, it's quite eye-opening for us to see the way people are still dressed, if you like. But the book needn't be judged by the cover. The security chaps, everyone he's met have been very, very gentle. No troublemakers, no trouble whatsoever. Some of them look quite intimidating to us.
Just shows that it's still quite strong as well, doesn't it? With 15, 16
it still
years.
seems to be as vibrant as it is. You thought it's a scene that kind of disappeared a few years ago, and you come here and there's how many thousands of people here still doing it and living it, and that's kind of a real eye-opener. As well as it is for me, anyway.
Mm. Seems you weren't around then.
Well, it'd been born.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was it like to play out there tonight?
Bloody hard work.
It
was great.
Very good. Yeah, really enjoyed it. We might even be tempted to do another one someday. You never know.
2076.
So if we go right back to the beginning, to the period when the band first formed, can you tell me a little bit about the atmosphere and the music scene in general, about that time?
Well, we weren't exactly on the crest of the first wave of punk, but we were pretty much influenced by the sort of general influences that inspired the whole movement. We came out of the sort of glam rock period. Gary Glitter and the Sweet, and I have to confess to be quite a fan of all those David Bowie. But other than that sort of music, there wasn't a great deal going on. And it sounds very cliched, this, I'm sure all the bands are saying it, but there was a lot of stadium rock bands and old university bands, hippie bands that were basically not accessible to the general public, and it was the punk movement that encouraged bands at a very grassroots level to get together and to actually have a forum to get on stage and play, even if they only knew 1, 2, 3 chords.
Yeah.
And
if they were just playing in front of their friends, you know, it didn't matter. It was just the fact that you could pick up. I mean, we started at school. I mean, the first wave that came out, Glyn and I were 14, something like that, 13, 14, and we started out by miming along to like Sweet and Gary Glitter and stuff to our school friends.
in the classroom.
In our school music classes. Couldn't even play anything, just mime. And then from there, he learned to play the guitar. I managed to get hold of the drum kit.
I learned to play bits of the
Bits of the
guitar.
guitar, still are. And it just went from there, really. Just a couple of schoolmates in the middle of Hertfordshire, middle of nowhere. There's a great atmosphere in Hitchin, where we're from. We're not like a London band or anything like that. There was a big movement. There was an awful lot of punks and skinheads around, sort of like 1978, 79, 80, 81 in Hitchin. And there were quite a few bands, and we just come up through that, just through mucking about at school, having a sort of rehearsing and jamming in his mum's living room.
It was a vehicle, really. It was a vehicle that a lot of bands used to actually get into the limelight that they wouldn't have had the opportunity to do a few years previous, because the record business was that closed. And you've got a lot of bands still around today, and have been over the last few years: Spandau Ballet, The Jam, Blondie, loads of bands which were essentially punk garage bands that you probably wouldn't have heard of if it weren't for the general movement. We didn't quite reach those heights.
No.
So, you mentioned earlier the Apocalypse tour.
Yeah.
That's gone down in history as one of the most notorious tours of punk ever.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about that?
It came from a gig, didn't it? It came from a gig in London at the Lyceum. We'd never ever played a gig in London. We played in our local area, Hitchin. There was quite a big venue in Stevenage called Bowes Lion House, where a lot of bands that were on the circuit come and play. And the guy that was our manager at the time was a promoter there, and he was up in London chatting to this agency, booking bands for Bowes Lion for the coming months, and just played this guy a tape of ours, a demo tape, and the guy said, well, I'm putting this show on in London, you know, do you reckon your guys would want to come up and play? And we'd never ever played in London, not a small pub gig, nothing. And
I think
in London was a Lyceum.
the Apocalypse gig was actually a catalyst for the second wave of
Yeah,
the punk
that's
movement.
it.
It was a consolidating initiative, really, whereby there were a lot of bands around at that time that got a fair following, but to bring them all together into one show, which was then taken around the country, encouraged a lot of people to follow what was going on there. It got a lot of publicity, and you know, from there the movement, the second wave, carried on for the next few years. I think on the back of that, and the Anti-Nowhere League, they were actually on the Apocalypse bill, but
Not on the tour.
not on the tour. We subsequently played gigs with them, but they were, you know, part of the original Apocalypse movement. What talking about them for, anyways?
But it was the gig was so successful in London. I don't even think they realised how the promoters realised the sort of what it stirred up. It meant that people could go out and see 4 bands and pay the normal sort of money they paid to see sort of one band. He slung them all together, and thank you very much. Yeah, and because it was so successful, off it went on the road, and they used to have back one as well.
That's the price of going on first.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me how and why you actually got involved with punk rather than any other form of music?
Bit by default, really. And the honest answer, like John said, we were 14 or so when we were influenced by the Damned and the bands like that we were going around at the time, and we decided that we had quite a desire to play instruments ourselves, and we actually set about doing that. Punk was probably the most accessible sort of music for people who couldn't play very well.
Yeah.
I think, in the first instance, and we were actually quite successful on the back of the stuff we wrote. at that age, 14, 15, 16, schoolboy stuff. A lot of our songs were tongue-in-cheek. You know, the music was aggressive, you know, along the influence of what we were hearing at the time. But yeah, in general, we took it quite lightly and didn't really expect to particularly get anywhere.
No.
And as we started playing local gigs and getting a following, we perhaps became a bit more serious about it. And you know, over the years, the songs we've written are a bit more considered, a bit more musically well structured, and unfortunately, by the end of the second wave, as far as we were concerned, we actually felt that we had a very strong set of songs, a very strong set, but it's a very difficult thing to cross over from the punk track into the general music thing at large. I'm not saying that, you know, totally repudiate the punk scene, but you know, certainly what we were doing towards the latter part perhaps didn't fit in quite as well as it did as the stuff we were playing earlier.
We were always called a pop punk band as well. It was said of us, I think, by Mr. Gary Bushell. Pop punk band.
Now they liken this to a earthier version of the Buzzcocks.
Buzzcocks, really. Which
I find.
Yeah.
Enough said.
Label us whatever they like.
Okay. So you ended up on Secret Records, I
On what's
believe. You ended up on Secret Records.
Secret, yeah.
Again, who have become somewhat of a legendary label. Is there any background you can give us to that label?
You want the honest background?
Whatever you want to say.
We were at a crossroads at a particular time, 1981, I suppose, where we were approached by a professional manager who had in his back pocket a deal with Secret Records, which meant that we'd get an advance up front, and meant we didn't have to worry about working, and we could go on tour. And on the other hand, Miles Copeland was very interested in working with us, but it's a better long-term strategy. But in the short term, we opted to go for the deal with the manager.
He used this word. What was that word he came out with? America, something like that. So where do we sign? That sort of thing, really.
Yeah.
He did say it's possible we could go to the States, and like for us, it's like, wow, America.
Unfortunately, Secret collapsed.
Yeah. We went down the wrong path, basically.
Yeah. If you're watching, Miles, we're sorry.
Yeah, very. Yeah, that was it.
It's not over yet.
Still available for weddings and bar mitzvahs.
Right, so what can you tell me about your personal outlook on life and how that's changed through being involved with a band?
No one want to answer that?
Oh, Simon, you can speak.
Can you ask it again?
How has working with a band changed your personal outlook on life? Or has it changed it?
It's a real tough question. I suppose the immediate thing is that it gives you the opportunity to do something that not a lot of people get the opportunity to do. And to come here and play in front of how many thousands of people were here was like quite an experience. I don't think you don't go away from it feeling any different. You go away from it feeling elated for a period of time. It's another part of it. It's another dimension of your life. But I think it'd be wrong to say it was anything kind of more elaborate than that.
Profound.
Yeah. I think that it's the most important thing is you go out and enjoy it and enjoy doing it, and then go away and get on with whatever it is that you do. And just hold that in your head, and you know you do it, and you've done it. And I think it's quite simple. I don't really think it's much more.
No. How's it changed you, Roy?
It's a bit of a shock. It's a bigger shock I had as moving from Liverpool during this show. I mean, we had some good times, like a good set together. As Glyn mentioned, it kind of didn't work out through management, but it's a buzz to get back after so long. You know? Get back together, get that old adrenaline rush again. It's a phase, it's brilliant. Do it again, you know, and again and again. Fantastic. But I mean, compared to, say, we all have our own lives and everything, you know.
It's nice to play loud.
Right?
It's nice to play loud, though.
Yeah. It's not
It's
important.
great
It's,
just to switch off your
Yeah.
normal life and just switch into something that's a little bit surreal for a couple of days.
Winning the lottery might charge me more.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be tonight.
Yeah. So, things crept on until about 1990, and you had the Seattle wave of what they based it on punk ethics. You had Nirvana, bands like that, the whole sub-pop culture.
Yeah.
And then more recently you got bands like Green Day, Offspring, Rancid. The media accept that, seem to accept it, yet they still won't accept UK punk rock. I mean, what's your opinions?
Sorry, which press one? World press or American press?
The British media don't seem to acknowledge.
There's a different image to the American punk scene. I mean, you quoted Nirvana, and certainly there's been a lot of bands coming out of America that have clearly been very influenced by the punk scene. Guns N' Roses being one that hasn't gone unnoticed. But generally, punk originated arguably in America. I mean, some of the bands out there, New York Dolls, Talking Heads, lots of bands there. But by the time it was converted into the English side, I think the media were instrumental in creating that image anyway. Certainly.
I think a lot of the media got very precious about the first couple of years of it, and then anything that came after that they were very dismissive of. And I think that a lot of the sort of 30, 40 something media that were around at the time or around now hold that period very precious and are completely blinkered about looking at or accepting or considering anything other than that they first knew in the first couple of years.
And there's certainly a stigma.
I think there's a kind of a, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think there's kind of a snobbery about it, which maybe has caused a lot of the problems. I don't know. But I think it was in Q last month, there was this big feature about this kind of punk scene going on in LA or something.
the whole of society's changed everywhere, hasn't it? It's 15, 20 years on now. People have changed, everyone's changed, people are older. I think it's just the way things are, isn't it?
Society in general is going to find it very hard to accept people with pierced orifices all over the place and Mohicans. And whether they were American or English, I think they'd be received in exactly the same way in this country. Because I think the ones that have been more successful have been the bands that have moved away from the hardcore stereotype punk image.
So, do you think that punk rock actually changed anything?
Did for a while. It stalled the cycle of music, the way it was going. It certainly generated a lot of fresh blood into the music scene throughout the late 70s and into the mid 80s. It stagnated, in my view, again and went back to the protected record company industry, which generated its own music for its own
Look at the
profit.
indie scene. Look at the indie scene now.
But I think, if you look at the bands that are successful now, I think a lot of them have drawn influence from the early punk scene.
I think it's one of the best things that happened to music. Personally.
Especially at the time as well, when you consider at that time there was absolutely nothing around of any interest to anybody. You can think of hundreds of bands that have charted and gone top 10 in the last 15, 20 years that have been influenced by...
Or that have actually come out of the punk scene.
It's made a lot of people very rich.
The Police, list them off.
Paul Weller.
So, to use, what is the best thing that came out of punk rock?
For me, the music.
Yeah, for me, it was the opportunity that we had, on the back of the movement, to actually play in a band. We had 4 or 5 years of doing it for a profession and having a great time in the process and travelling the world.
Yeah. At 19, travelling around America. I mean, there aren't many that can say they've done that, and it's something I'll never forget. Whether I ever did it again or not, it doesn't matter. No one can take it away. I can remember a lot of it as if it were yesterday. It was just absolutely brilliant, fantastic. Wouldn't have changed anything, apart from Miles Copeland.
You wouldn't change Miles?
No, I would change Miles, but
I would have
stuck with Miles.
Okay. So what about the worst thing? What's the worst thing that came out of punk rock?
Out of punk rock itself. I think it's the image that went through it in the eyes of the media. And it certainly set the limit for bands who were
It was seen as just
completely labelled with that image to progress, and there weren't many bands who actually shook themselves out of it. But there's a stigma attached with the image of a punk rocker, the stereotype image, which I think was created by the press by and large anyway. So I think the stereotyping,
they paint a picture of destructiveness when really, if you look at it, it was quite the opposite, really. So.
Yeah, there's bands around that were just geared on destruction. And, it's their choice.
Worms on now.
Yeah.
Right. So finally, in as few words as possible, what does punk mean to you?
Adolescence, attitude, a platform for really expressing your feelings about the world in general, and the music was perhaps the biggest thing that we'd well, I don't know what I'm saying. But yeah, I mean, I think punk was actually sort of a good vehicle for adolescence, actually, in some ways. We went in and out of that and came out in a punk band.
Yeah. So it's just something we did and had an awful lot of fun. A couple of mates. We just had an awful lot of fun. Like tonight, 20 years on. Or for us, 15, 16 years on, still having a bloody...
You said that there's an awful lot of post-adolescence out there. And in here.
Alright, so anything else you want to add before we finish up? Anything you'd like to mention?
Good night.
Great, it's cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Leave Miles your phone number, can't you?